A home. It's something we all need. But for too many, having a safe place to make a home is out of reach. The challenges can seem insurmountable. And yet, each and every day, people are coming together to provide safe, quality, and affordable housing for those in need. Welcome to Let's Talk Housing. I'm your host, Sara Goldvine. Join us as we listen to and learn from people in British Columbia who are creating strong, inclusive communities where everyone can thrive.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Housing. Today, we're joined by Meera Mathew of the Existence Project, based out of Greater Victoria. They create accessible multimedia projects and capacity-building initiatives for the unhoused and intersectional community events that center the voices of people with lived experience, all with the broad goal of humanizing homelessness. For transparency, we're recording this session in February of 2024, and so the conversation reflects the matters of this time. Before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording this session today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, on whose lands I both live and work. And I express my gratitude to their peoples, past and present, for welcoming me and my family and allowing me to do this important community building work today and every day. Meera, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I work with the Existence Project over here in what is currently known as Victoria. This is the unceded and traditional and contemporary lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, specifically the Wasanek, the Songhees, the Esquimalt nations. And I'm very, very fortunate to have been able to live here for so many years on these lands that only exist in the wealth and health that they do because of the peoples that have taken care of it for generations and generations. And I think it's really important, especially for me in the work we're going to talk about here today and the conversations that are on this podcast a lot around housing and for me around homelessness. And you talk about displacement and community change that is so directly linked to the Indigenous peoples of this land and their experiences. So it is directly relevant for sure.
Yeah, it's so relevant. And you've chosen to bring that meaning specifically into your efforts on storytelling and working with folks who are unhoused or houseless. Can you tell us what brought you to this work?
Well, personally, I came from a background of art and the creative work. Actually, I've always been really passionate about the way that we can connect through art and through story specifically. And discovering the Existence Project was such a gift because I got to see the way that story was being used to connect with people that were struggling, people that were seeking community, that were marginalized, and really build resilience there and care and an appreciation and a dignity for those people. And so I came in as a volunteer and I got to see that happen. And I was so amazed at how I actually hadn't seen something like this before. It made so much sense. And it drew me into the work. And I think that is a big part of what still motivates this project today, for sure.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I am completely biased in favor of storytelling, which is why I am so pleased to be able to do this kind of work. But, I'd love your thoughts on the power of storytelling to affect change. Certainly, we know that storytelling has been how many, many cultures and communities have affected change over the course of human history. In 2024, though, I mean, it's very specific context. Why do you think that storytelling is so powerful right now?
I think it's such a fascinating question because I absolutely agree with you. There is something that is so innately human about storytelling. It's been such a part of our culture, of all cultures, for so long. I'm half Indian. I know in Indian culture and religion, and it goes back so far into the past, the way that story is how we connect ourselves to our place and to our people. And there is something desperately needed in that now. In 2024, we live in this time where, I mean, post and kind of during pandemic, where we are right now, we've had people get really divided and isolated and siloed. We've seen services, organizations get siloed, and communities really are having to fight hard, I think, to connect in these really real ways. I don't like to blame everything on technology. I think there's a lot of community building that can happen in technology too, but we're kind of having to relearn all the time how to make relationship with each other. And I see that in my sector a lot, when we're talking about an issue that is so huge and so heavy. It is easier, maybe is not the right word, but it is accessible for people to talk about things like homelessness, say, or other social issues with this disconnect. But we just simply can't make progress when we lose the human piece of it. And that's where I think story is so powerful. I think it is kind of the great equalizer. It is the thing that reminds us all how human we are. I mean, we are, not to be dramatic, but I personally believe we are all stories. That's what we are. That's what we can bring to each other. And there is something transformative about sitting down in a room with someone where you might think you have nothing in common, where you might be nervous, afraid, unsettled, and being able to just start to share more and more about yourself, little things that you get to talk about. I've had the gift of doing workshops now with people that I thought I had nothing in common with, but we start talking about our pets, and all of a sudden I recognize you, in a way that is meaningful. And I think that's what story does. It allows us to recognize ourselves and other people. And so when we're talking about change, social change, huge conversations that can really easily be overwhelming, I think story is that path. It's that way to bring us in and remember why we want to make this change, who we're doing this for, and who we're doing it with. And I think there's something that any person can recognize. It's why we watch movies. It's why we listen to music. And so when you can sit down with someone in a room and just talk to each other and get to know each other, it's really special, and it's really, really, truly impactful.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Humans are wired for story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that the Existence Project does and how you actually bring people together, bring community together, and humanize homelessness through some of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. The Existence Project really sees kind of our work in 3 steps. It sees, the very root of what we do is working to empower and lift up the voices with lived experience, people that have lived or living experience. And, our first focus is on connecting with them and working with them to help empower their stories. And then from there, we try to create intersectional spaces, community spaces, opportunities for people to share their stories with the wider community. And then with that, we want to take our learnings and our relationships and create impact in the community. And so what that looks like is often we'll start with storyteller training. It's a program we have that it can look different depending on what they're working with us on. But it's really all about taking someone through their life experiences and helping them reflect on them from a place of resilience, of strength, and realizing the learnings that they have from their experience that they can share with the community. Gives them some skills in speaking to that story, and we really work through that in a trauma-informed way, in a way that feels safe to them to revisit, and gives them a bit of a toolkit and options for them to share their stories and experiences in a way that can communicate those learnings and give them some comfort in speaking. A lot of people don't realize the value of their own stories. I think in any environment, and especially when you're working with people that have been pushed down a lot and devalued and dehumanized a lot, and to just remind them that they have a voice, they have a story, they are human beings that deserve dignity, that belong. It's incredible to see. I mean, people are amazing, and the folks that we work with are doing really brave things by sharing their stories, and that's always the first step, is just making that relationship and showing them they can do that. We have some workshops we do around the community, often centering these storytellers around learning, creative reflection, connection. And we also have a media wing where we do mini documentaries, spotlight episodes for YouTube and some other platforms to help bring those voices out to a wider audience, or have a more accessible avenue for people that aren't comfortable getting up in front of a crowd to share their experiences. And and then we try to have a presence in the community, share those stories out there, and be a connector as much as we possibly can.
I love your approach here. I mean, I think many of us have seen stories used well and stories used in harmful ways. I mean, stories are so powerful. I think one of our challenges is that often when stories are harmful, we're not always aware if they're harmful to the experiences of folks who may be marginalized and might see their stories used in ways that don't really benefit them. Or can you talk a little bit about how you create that space and how you create an environment where folks can tell their stories and actually be able to see their own interest being brought forward and have that be an empowering experience? What does that balance look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's been a big learning for us, because it's always been, I think, at the heart of what we do. What brought us into a lot of the work that we do now is realizing that the first need, I don't know if I can say the core need, but definitely the first need is for folks to feel heard in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is actually listening. And I think that's where we start. I think that's where we all have to start. And that we've just seen so many times, and we've heard, this is the feedback that we've been lucky enough to get from the people that we work with and from the people that are out in the community, how often mainstream media and news outlets and other spaces can be extractive, can go in with something in mind already for what they want or what they expect, and who share, for the most part, what they want to say. And we've been lucky in the position we're in to be able to go into these spaces or work with people and say, we are doing this for you. So we want you to tell us how you want your story represented, how you want to be represented. And we're here to make that work. We have the skill sets to help get this story out, but you are the expert on your own experiences and your own story. And that's why we are here. If you're going to talk to people with lived experience, if you're going to want their stories or their experiences to inform what you're doing, then you need to go into that space understanding your position in it, which is to listen and to support. And maybe to be the person that has a skill set that they can bring in and help use to elevate those voices. But really, I think when we see that extractive practice with story, when we see story being misused, misrepresented, it's because there wasn't a listening time where we were seeing them as the experts, where we were looking to them for guidance, to the people whose stories we're taking for guidance. Something that's really important to us in the work we do is reciprocal relationship. We talk about that a lot. If we're going to be trauma informed, we have to understand that this is something that we're collaborating on, and that we want our relationships to feel reciprocal, meaningful, wherever possible, long term. And I think it's a practice that needs to come into a lot more work beyond storytelling work that we do, or media work. I know I will probably talk about this a lot on this episode, but I really I know confidently that bringing lived experience to the table when we're talking about this issue and we're talking about solutions is the key to building things that work. And to do that, we need to be doing that in a way that's ethical. We need to be doing that in a way that is listening based and valuing and prioritizing those voices. And that is, I think, where we miss and where we misuse and we harm, because rightfully so, a lot of people that are in these positions that have these kinds of stories around homelessness, around housing insecurity, and all of the other issues that come with that, they don't feel like they can trust working with these different groups, whether it's media or policy, because, for good reason, because they have not been able to trust from experience. And if you want to work with people, you have to be willing to do the work to build trust and relationship. And I think that's that's the path we're trying to take to do it in the right way. And I feel like that's where I can see it going wrong so often is that lack of relationality, that lack of relationship. I actually just found a video this morning from one of the folks that's in our documentary, and she says, you allow us to talk. You're actually hearing from the heart from people. And she said something along the lines of, you're listening, so you're making us feel human. And I think that connects back to what we were talking about with story. People know in their heart, when they're being heard and when they feel valued and human, and when they don't. I think we've all had those moments. And so when you're working with a group of people that have experienced what they've experienced, and we're asking them to step up into our systems, we have to take the time to listen.
Yeah. Let's take the time now to listen to one of those stories. I know you've lined up a couple of storytellers. Let's listen to the clip from the first one now.
Sharing my story was a very emotional and healing experience. It was very bittersweet. I thought I was very prepared, and I was for the most part, but towards the end of it, I think it kind of hit me that I was telling my life story to, a room full of a lot of strangers, and it was very humbling. Especially to have so many change makers and wonderful human beings come up to me after and want to speak on just being a witness to my story and thanking me for wanting to share it and to spread awareness and to try to help others. I really hope that if I could even just change one person's life with my story, that would be a huge deal. I know as a young Indigenous biracial woman, it's been a journey. I'm only 35, but it's been quite a journey. And I think if I had had a role model like myself growing up, things might have been a little bit easier for me. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do feel that way because I never really had anybody I could relate to or look up to. And that was a big thing in my life. Between my work with a local organization for housing justice and doing this storytelling experience, I just have really healed so much, and I have a new appreciation for the things that I've been through, and I recognize that they don't make me who I am, but they are a part of who I am, if that makes any sense. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not my trauma, and I think that's what a lot of people who've been through trauma just want everyone to know, I've been through things, but that's not who I am, and I didn't deserve it. So, yeah, I think I've really come to accept the things that have happened in my life, and they don't hurt me anymore, and I'm able to speak on them, and I'm able to just come from a place of understanding for others and just wanting to help lift and heal others in the same position as myself or that were in similar positions. Regarding how my relationship with my own voice has evolved over the last year, I really feel that I've become more confident. I've become more aware, more mindful, and more compassionate. And I think that those are all wonderful things. And I really hope that I can help other people with their stories, because it is so healing. And I guess I'm just so grateful that I had this opportunity, and I hope that I can continue this type of work in order to make the changes that we need. I think the biggest thing to realize is that there is no one solution for homelessness. There needs to be many solutions. Tiny villages are a huge hit. I know for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, there's tiny villages popping up all over the world. I think that's something that could happen in Canada, and not just for people with dementia or Alzheimer's, all kinds of tiny villages. I think the biggest gap between the nonprofit organizations and the government organizations is people with lived experience. It's one thing for a bunch of people to have a bunch of money, and another thing for a bunch of other people to want to do some really amazing work, but where to start, right? Nobody knows where to start because they don't come from a place of experience. And I think having a lot of people with lived experience can not only open the door for others, but really show society that people who become unhoused are still human beings. We are still valuable. We are still worthy, and we have things to contribute, valuable things to contribute to society. And I just really hope that the stigma around homelessness can be changed slowly, because it is so disheartening to see the way that some of our society, our police, or even our mental health workers, our nurses, our doctors, the way that they treat mental health and people on the streets, homeless people with drug addictions, is really, really not human at all. And I think that's got to change. We need to realize that these are our brothers and sisters, our aunties, our uncles, our mothers, our fathers, our daughters, our sons. These are valuable human beings, and I was one of these people once. At the tender age of 17, I was homeless on the streets, and I was just lucky enough to be able to pull myself out of it. And I really hope that I can help pull others out of it as well. I hope that my voice can help resonate with what needs to be done, with the work that needs to be done, and with the people that need to hear it. Thank you. Thank you.
It was beautiful. I want to just really thank, through you, Meera, thank the storyteller who brought that voice. So many things that we can pick up on. I think one thing that I'd like to dig into a little bit is just the perspectives of people with lived experience. I'm going to be real with you. I spent a lot of time in my day job with decision makers. Some of the folks that your storyteller was referring to, I'm one of them, right? And even when we aspire to really center and to consider the perspectives of folks with lived experience, folks without housing, as we do at BC Housing, that's our aspiration, right? The systems that we're working within put up lots of barriers to that. They really don't make it easy. So I'd love your thoughts, Meera, just on what do you think that decision makers like folks at BC Housing, like folks at the province, can really learn about the importance of listening, and specifically listening to the voices of people with lived experience?
That's a great question, Sarah, and thank you for asking that. And also, I think something that we can learn is that, and I think this is a bit of a perspective shift in a more general sense on how we work in our societies. Lived experience is a skill set and an expertise, in the same way that our educational system provides skill sets and expertise. And I really believe that if we can categorize our folks in our communities that have been through these experiences as experts on the issue, and make spaces as consultants and experts, and have it in our mind that that is the reality we are working under, it can really shift the way that we have conversations. I think often accidentally, when we try to find a way to engage with the people that are boots on the ground, people on the front lines, either living it or working on it, we can really easily accidentally do that in a tokenizing way because we want to engage, but we don't know how to change the way that we work to really incorporate that learning. Because we have systems that function a certain way and we are used to working through things a certain way. And so it takes a little bravery and a little innovation. And I think a part of that is changing the way we categorize people in our minds and valuing the expertise that exists on the streets of our community and realizing that accessing that does mean a lot of what our storyteller talks about, having more supports out there that can be access. I think about outreach workers and I think about caretakers of some of the street community that have those relationships, that have the time and the passion and the understanding of how to keep those relationships. And I think about what a great resource those people are too in accessing the community and understanding that we have experts that can help show us the way. And if we're willing to bring them into our systems, to adjust the way that we go through a decision-making process, that to include the folks that are accessing these stories, the folks whose stories they are, it is very possible, but it takes some conscious, intentional decision. There's a story I heard about someone locally who was in a role of connector, collaboration, going out to hear from the people with lived experience who had lived experience themselves, and who was asked to be in that role by decision makers and policymakers in power. And that was wonderful. That was a great use of resources to have that. And I spoke with her, and I remember her saying, it's so great that I get to be in this role, but I wish that I actually got to speak to the policymakers, because that was a disconnect. You know, how do we bring what we're learning to the actual place where we make the change? So that's something that I really learned, because, you know, I'm actually not an expert. I just get to be in a position where I talk to the people who are, and it's a gift. And that to me was so clear. It was so clear that they could understand exactly where the need was, exactly where the gap was. And I think it's tricky because our systems are big and complex, and there are many people trying to work on this issue, but we have experts that are there on the ground ready, and they just need the path into those conversations to bring that info and those stories. And it's so possible, you know, but it takes change, and it takes patience, and it takes resources. And all of that is important, and what we have to seem to fight so hard for, I think, especially in the realm that we work in, which is talking to our community and trying to shift that narrative. There's a lot of community division around it. So sometimes it feels like a lot of the work is convincing people that this is an issue we need to care about before we can really get the wheels turning. And that's what we're hoping to do with our work too, is just demonstrate why it's so important and so immediate. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah. It's a big question, you know, there's so many pieces to it.
Yeah. I think there's so many layers there. And, you know, I'd love to do it. We have another storyteller who's provided some audio. I'd love to cue that up and be able to bring their voice into the conversation.
I have been rebuilding my voice after losing my teeth while staying at an emergency shelter here in Victoria. And it's been years. And one of the motivations I have is to be able to tell my story of having my teeth knocked out at the emergency shelter. I think that not enough people know things like that. So that certainly is one of the ways that I use my voice now. I believe that lived experience has an important voice at the table, and I'm finding that banding together with other people who've had lived experience of homelessness and living in shelters, living in encampments, trying to hide your tent from bylaw every morning, etc., that we can speak louder as a group.
Thank you to that storyteller for sharing their perspectives with your team, Meera, and bringing it here to Let's Talk Housing. I think there's something really powerful about bringing together folks. We have the storyteller mentioned specifically the importance of banding together because we can speak louder as a group. Can you talk a little bit about how people with similar experiences can be brought together? How do you approach creating that sense of community in that space?
Yeah, I definitely can. And I think it's such an important point to pick up on. One thing I think that's so interesting about what I've learned through all of the work we've done actually is this really common pillar of community. And, part of what I've learned in that is that community is there in a lot of these spaces. It has to be. And it's also part of the struggle when people are trying to move into solutions, shelters, temporary housing solutions, all of that. It's a big conversation we have is what happens when you lose that community? How do you rebuild that community? So the best place I always like to start is where I got to witness community being created organically and out of need. When we were in a park, Beacon Hill Park in Victoria is one of the landmark parks in our city. And during the pandemic, there were a lot of folks that were displaced outside. Shelters were closed for health reasons. And so parks became a big space, I think, in many areas for people to shelter. And we started to connect with people in Beacon Hill Park and do video work, which eventually led to a documentary we made called Moving Day. And one of the main themes throughout that project, and the reason it even became a documentary, is that we got to meet this collective of people that we expected to be, all these separate storytellers. And absolutely they had their own stories and they had their own experiences. It was really diverse, everyone's story through that. But there was a network that came out of people being in a space consistently, having a certain degree of stability in that time. Folks were allowed from a limited amount of time to keep their shelters up 24/7. So people were staying in place, and there were, neighborhoods of this area. There were regular Monday circle meetings that came out of an Indigenous practice, and a couple folks with Indigenous cultural understanding and folks that were Indigenous that were in the park helped to start that. And it was a beautiful thing that was happening every week because there was a need for people to have a space to come together and just introduce themselves and bring how they were doing to the circle. If there were needs, people would ask for supplies if they needed it. People would offer their time if they had it, their energy. Some folks that were living in vans offered rides, helped with laundry. And that wasn't organized by anybody other than the folks that were living there. And that taught me something about, again, we're going to talk about resilience and creativity, but also an ability to survive that come naturally from people that are going through these experiences. And I'm not trying to say that it was perfect and beautiful and rosy. I mean, it was incredibly challenging. People were living outside, but that is exactly why that community was necessary. And I've heard many times people talk about when they get into housing, they actually lose a lot of the community they had when they were on the street because we don't have those spaces for people across living situations, class, setups, housing setups to really reconnect and come back together. And it's really amazing to understand the ways that we want to and can help each other survive. And also so impactful to understand how necessary community support is for solutions to work. And so, if we think about what's needed to build community in these spaces, I'll say it again, I think intention. I think something that would be amazing in each of the housing solutions we see would be a regular, ongoing community check-in environment, a facilitated, a supportive space where people can show up as themselves and show up as they are and be met where they are. I think that's a huge part of our work in general, but it's also what makes that kind of relationship honest, is that people can come because they need each other, but they can just come as they are and participate as much as they can and know that there is someone that will be there. And it's really heartbreaking to see people lose that, but it is one of the most powerful things we have. So, ways that can be built, well, we've seen tiny home villages pop up. That was referenced by one of our storytellers, that have been really amazing solutions because there are opportunities and programs in those villages for people to contribute to the community there. Gardens, there have been common spaces, ongoing programming. There's room for people to step away and have space, which is also really important. Safety. And I think trying to keep the people that are using services more connected and trying to keep those services more connected, that is what is going to allow us to keep that sense of community going through the different solutions that we hope to see and that we have now. That was talked about it well as well, and it comes up a lot, the need for variety in what our solutions look like. And I absolutely agree. I think that's something we've heard over and over again. And the consistent thing in those would still be a sense of stability, a sense of care, and a sense of community.
Yeah, I love that you've touched on the importance of community and creating spaces for people to connect with each other, for people to connect with service providers, for community to emerge. And I think that, we have seen the power of that when it's created in whether it's a purpose-built building or whether it's some of these tiny shelter villages that are very hot topic right now in the housing sector. And certainly we've got several on the island. One thing I wanted to touch on as well is just the importance of story for healing, because that's something that both of the storytellers mentioned, was just in their own ways. They really talked about the importance of and the power of sharing their own story as part of the healing process. Can you share just a little bit about your perspective on the role of story in healing?
I think really this idea connects back to a lot of what we've talked about today, because there is something so vulnerable about story work when we are reflecting on ourselves and when we are just telling our truths. It's extremely vulnerable. And I think that's also why it's healing, because we hear so much, and we've said this before, how feeling heard and feeling seen is itself such a healing thing and such a meaningful thing. And I think doing the work that I get to do, that we do here, and that our storytellers do for the community, it is so much a process of witnessing yourself, seeing yourself, and seeing the value and the strength in that, and then being able to share that and feel seen and feel heard. I think it's all of those pieces together that make it so transformative and so healing. And for a lot of the folks that we work with, and I think for a lot of people in general, there are many times in their lives where they have been invisible or felt invisible and have not felt empowered to step forward, to make decisions, to stand up and say, I have something to say, and it is important, and it is meaningful. And what we hope to do is show them that they can do that they've actually always had the ability to do that, and give them the space to process what that means for them. And I think that's what's so amazing about working with our own experiences is when we get the space to reflect on them and step into them with a place of strength, with a place of pride and dignity. I'll say it again. I think, we all deserve dignity. And to feel that in our hearts when we're looking back on experiences that are painful and are often very wrapped up in our identity, it is really, really transformative, and it gives people strength. And I think that's, in whatever way we can do that in our work, sometimes it is working with people's whole stories. Sometimes it's just asking them, hey, what's your dream job? And that's been one of the greatest questions I've gotten to ask people, and getting to hear that we have carvers and artists and carpenters, people that were electricians, people whose dream jobs it is to produce music. I think there's something that is so important when we talk about people, where it's like, let's give their identities a more colorful vision. Let's see that these folks have so many layers to them. And I love watching people realize that that's what they can talk about when we want to hear about their experiences. Tell me about a personal hero of yours. I think that's also what story can do, is it reminds us that there are so many pieces to us. And like one of our storytellers said, the hardship doesn't make them who they are. It is not who they are, but it is something they experienced, they grew through, they learned from, and they can now share. And I hope that that's the transformation people can take from it. And I think that's what we often hear people take from being able to talk more about what they've been through and be heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that transformative power. I want to squeeze in one last question, Meera. We're in what's often referred to as a housing crisis, right? It's hard to turn on the news or flip through social or pop to the grocery store or pick up your kid from school without running into conversations about housing and homelessness. Given how heated those conversations are right now, what do you see as being the next steps for the Existence Project? Like, where to from here, given the level of conversation around housing and homelessness right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Where to from here for the Existence Project? Well, we truly believe that the work that we're doing to empower voices of lived experience is the path forward. I think it's the gap that a lot of people need and are looking for and are even aware of, but don't have the resources or the time or the ability to engage in. And so our goal is always to try to find that need and fill it and be that connector. And I think what we try to do is be responsive to the conversations that are happening in our community and to the needs that are being expressed. And something that we're really working on is finding ways for folks with lived experience, folks with their stories. What role do we get to have in bringing those stories to more of our services and our bigger institutions? I think we've talked about the fact that it's really hard to create that access when we're working with big organizations and we're working with individuals that are going through or have gone through really challenging things. That's a hard bridge to build. And so something that we're really focusing on in the future for our project is creating resources that are really accessible to organizations that are directly impacting people experiencing homelessness, to organizations like healthcare providers, like transit systems. We need to realize all the different pieces that interact with the issue of homelessness. And one of our goals right now is really finding a way to get these learnings into the spaces where people can access them and act on them and get that lens shift that we need collectively, that we all need to be working on to ask the right questions and be able to shift in these small and big ways in how we treat the issue and how we interact with people in the day-to-day. I think that's the trick that we're finding as a project is, when I look forward, I think about all of the people I still want to connect with in the community on the ground. The situation is changing all the time, and there are so many stories out there that are worth hearing and people that deserve to step up and be able to share. So that's definitely a priority. And then trying to get those experiences and those learnings into places that need them and want them, just try to be that connector.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited for what the Existence Project is able to bring to the conversation going forward. So thank you so much, Meera, and thank you to the two storytellers as well for joining us today. Let's talk again soon.
To learn more about BC Housing, including how to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit bchousing.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a rating. This will help others find Let's Talk Housing and join the conversation. You can subscribe to Let's Talk Housing on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.